Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining today. I just wanted to do this video. My last video was more spiritual, but this one is again going to be talking about some of the stuff that I'm familiar with coming from my background in college as a humanities major, an English major. I was an English major. So I was kind of like very interested in college with all sorts of things, criticism. I thought that the intellectual sphere was very intriguing to me, and seeing it was such an eye-opening experience to me to see things in that way. So again, with my videos, they're all free flow off the top of my head. I don't know what I'm going to say. I kind of think about a little bit of a topic, but today's topic is going to be kind of Marxism and what the way we see it manifesting in the world around us, but also some of its underlying spiritual motives that we need to be aware of as Christians and outsiders, because, guess what? It wasn't always just Christians who were being persecuted by Marxist regimes. It was anybody who smelt something fishy going on. So, and lots of people. So I would just start this out by saying, like, if you're seeing things in the news, if you're concerned, if you're not trusting the establishment, if you're watching people kind of like become indoctrinated and you feel like you're going crazy because of it, you're not crazy, you're actually seeing something, and this is intentional. This is a part of how Marxism works. And I just wanted to also note, I'm gonna present these ideas, and I know so many of my videos bring up Marxism. I almost bring it up in like every video. But I do think it's one of the biggest problems facing our world today. Obviously the biggest problem is, as Christians, we know it's the enemy. But basically, the Marxism that we're facing in America and in the Western world, it's happening in Europe. It's actually worse over there right now. They're having protests because they're having all these mask mandates and second round of lockdowns in Europe. So they're having all these protests over there now. Australia, Sweden, not Sweden, Switzerland, Germany, France, all these places are facing things. And now these are things that are happening that they're not talking about in the mainstream media. Let me just start out with this. So I'm going to just pull up and read some of these headlines. Now, this is from an alternative news source, these headlines. But like, I wanted to get into this because this is all gonna make sense. This might be a little bit of a longer video, but I think it's really important for us to keep talking about Marxism, to keep the conversation going, and to see how these things are manifesting all around us, and how they are a real threat to humanity. One of the things that communism does is it seeks to destroy humanity. It doesn't just seek to bring about the new utopia. That's the guise that it operates under. That it's seeking to bring about a better, more just society in the future. And that's why people who are communists or socialists, they believe that they're fighting for the good. They're fighting for charity. They're fighting for the oppressed. They're fighting for the victimized. And they're battling an oppressor. And right now in America, that's what's happening. We've been talking about it throughout my channel. But this is the problem. This is the dekulakization I'm talking about. Basically the oppressor that the left makes up is anybody who they want them to be, anybody who disagrees with them at any time. And it can be you. Even if you are an obedient person today, if tomorrow you're like, hey, I kind of suspect something's weird with this, you're canceled. Guess what? And so this cancel culture, identity politics, cultural Marxism, it all is interlinking. So let me just read some of these headlines. So Dr. Fauci says, the U.S. likely won't go into lockdown over COVID-19 Delta variant. Now that is good news, but like we said, this variant is causing an uproar in European countries where people are revolting now because they are having all their rights taken away from them by the government. They're being forced to stop working. They're being forced again to go into lockdowns due to this Delta variant. And the variant is a little scary, right? Like the cases are rising, but it doesn't seem like the death rates, at least last time I checked, have been rising a whole lot in correspondence to the rising cases for the Delta variant. But even though this seems like a good news headline, I think it was that same day or maybe the day before, Joe Biden did say it's likely that we're going to see more lockdowns. So, I mean, talk about if you want to scare the crap out of the American people, that's something you say as president. Oh, it's likely that we're going to see more lockdowns. People don't want to hear that. The first round of lockdowns didn't work. They didn't spread, like I said in another video, the worst amount of cases, the worst amount of deaths were happening in the states with the harshest lockdown measures. These lockdowns don't work. And I really am starting to suspect that they are not a measure to control the virus. They're not a measure to prevent people from getting sick. They're a measure to implement control and power over people. And I'm really starting to suspect that, because how can the president, with all the information he probably knows, which might not be very much because he's like in late stage dementia, but how much of this does he see that shows like, hey, these lockdowns didn't work. Hey, masks, they don't work that well. Maybe a little bit. So anyways, that's the first headline. And that's the thing, is like the mainstream media isn't reporting this stuff. They're not talking about the crazy stuff that the Biden administration is saying. So yesterday I posted something on Facebook about the Biden administration, because I do feel like our rights are coming under threats as Americans, and especially one particular group of Americans who believe a certain set of politics. They're having their rights come under threat. And I posted about that, and I was labeled, I was mocked, I was getting the eye roll emoji, and I was labeled as a QAnon. And I don't even know what QAnon is. Like, I know what it is, but I don't know what they believe, right? So now it's coming to the point where if you say anything about there being some sort of power play, you are a conspiracy theorist. You are an idiot. You are a crazy right-wing extremist, akin to a Nazi or a white supremacist. So this is the way that their brains work. This is how we have to start thinking about this stuff, guys, because that Marxists think that you're this, like they see you say something, and then they immediately jump to conclusions about your personal character. They jump to conclusions about you being evil, you being stupid, you being a conspiracy theorist. And that's the thing, is like when I see somebody post something about like that I disagree with, I don't jump to conclusions and say, oh, they're evil. Oh, they're just actually mentally handicapped or crazy, right? Like that's the suggestion with the Q conspiracy theorist accusation, is you're actually crazy. Like, you are an insane person. You should be locked up in an insane asylum for using or exercising your First Amendment right. So that's scary, to think that, like, hey, if I criticize this administration, people have their feelings hurt so much that they will label you evil, they will label you as crazy, they will label you as a right-wing extremist, a potential terrorist, and that's just like, that is conspiracy theory. That is a conspiracy to draw those connections based on one criticism of the Biden administration. To say, oh, you criticize the Biden administration? You must be crazy, evil, right-wing conspiracy theorist, potential extremist, etc. Like that, that's the oppressed oppressor mindset that's coming in here, where they're feeling so victimized by the GOP boogeyman that they see anybody who disagrees with them as fitting the caricature that they've already drawn for this evil person, which fits into a conservative Christian, right? Anyway, so that was a big tangent off the first headline there. Second headline is Sky News Australia, which is a conservative news agency, is suspended by YouTube. So there you go. That's the censorship that we're talking about with these big platforms. A lot of people are getting searching out for alternative information from YouTube because they can't find it anywhere else. I actually did a poll on my Instagram. You know how you can do those little polls on your stories? I did a poll like, is the media trustworthy? And everybody said no. There was not one person who voted yes. People don't trust the media establishment, right? People don't trust it, and that's not just a Trump thing. that's just a common sense thing, because like what I'm going to do in this video, you'll see I'm showing how this Marxist implementation is coming in from a top-down fashion, but it's also bubbling up from the people who are, you know, who are agreeing with this type of top-down government control. So anyways, the next headline was 397 children suffered heart inflammation after the COVID-19 vaccine. So yeah, that one doesn't really fit into what I'm talking about, but still, like, the vaccine is, I mean, that's something fishy. Like, if I had a 4-year-old child, I would not be giving them this vaccine. I would be letting them get sick and then letting them stay in their room, right? Or stay in the house and not go out and infect other people. I would not be giving them this vaccine. They don't need it. They're not going to die of this thing, right? So and then the response to that is, of course, well, it's so that other people don't get sick from your child. But it's like, hey, you know, I don't trust this vaccine. So let me just get into the vaccine a little bit, because I got the vaccine, and after my second round, I thought I was going to die. I was so sick, like my whole body felt like I got hit by a train. All night I couldn't sleep. I felt like because I was in such pain. I was so tired, but I couldn't sleep, but I was in so much pain. I got up at like 5 in the morning to use the restroom, went pee, and then was walking out of my restroom, and I was like, oh, I'm getting lightheaded, I'm going to go sit down. Then I woke up on the bathroom floor. Who knows, I could have been out for 20 minutes. I don't know what time it was. I woke up on the bathroom floor. I'm like, whoa, I get up. I passed out. And then I walk into my room, and I couldn't remember anything from the last 2 years of my life. It was the middle of winter. I couldn't remember what time it was, or what time of year it was, what season it was. My father passed away in September of 2019. I couldn't remember which one of my parents was still alive. I was like, I think one of my parents passed away, but I can't remember which one. And my aunt was here visiting, so I went into the other room, and I got my aunt. Like I didn't know she was visiting, but I was like, I think there might be somebody in my house. Like I think there's somebody visiting or something, but I couldn't remember who it was. So I walk in and I'm like, Sue, something's going on with me. And so she woke up and helped me, and I'm like, should I call 911? And I guess, like, I don't know what the numbers are now, but at that time, 25%, or at least like a high percentage of people who were going into the ER in Utah, in Salt Lake City, or I think it was the University of Utah, a large percentage of the people who were going into the ER were going in because of the vaccine. So these vaccines are a little scary. Like, I'm not trying to be conspiratorial here, but I'm just telling what I experienced. Like, I was worried that I was going to go back to sleep because I was really tired and not wake up. I was going to wake up in heaven, right? Because I was in such pain. I felt like my heart, like every time I stand up, my heart started beating. So this is just saying 397 children suffered heart inflammation after COVID-19 vaccine. So, you know, why are you giving this vaccine to your 5-year-old kid? Like, come on. They don't need it. They're not going to die of coronavirus. They're going to get sick, and then they're going to be fine, right? So, all right, statistically, they're not dying from the thing. National Institute of Health head, businesses should require vaccine credentials from customers. All right, so that's another scary one, right? Now they're going to start forcing everybody to get vaccines, or you can't buy. You know, you can't buy stuff. You can't go into businesses. National Institutes of Health head. I don't really know what that is, but anyways, I'm not going to read these articles in here, but these are the headlines, guys. These are things that are happening in our world today. But if you go on to CNN, which I think I'm going to do just for fun, CNN on YouTube, it's going to be like, oh, Trump tweeted this. The GOP said this. Governor Ron DeSantis did this. Meanwhile, you have our freedom is in danger. Protests erupt across Europe over COVID-19 mandates. All right, and then this one is in California. Nearly 2 million U.S. households owe, a big part of it is in California. Nearly 2 million U.S. households owe $15 billion in back rent report. So people aren't paying rent. They're posting signs outside of their apartments that say, "We don't have a job. We don't need to pay rent." Well, it's like, hey, guess what? If you walk outside and literally walk 15 steps and trip, you're gonna trip right into a job opportunity because, like, businesses all around the country are hurting to find people to work, but people aren't working because they're getting free money from the government, and then they're complaining that they're not able to make their rent. I mean, I don't know what's going on in California, but you know, the California government is now forcing these people to, they're forcing landlords not to evict people who haven't paid rent in like 9 months. So landlords aren't able to conduct business. So this is just pointing towards socialism, right? California is already really socialist, so yeah, no job, no rent. People are, you know, revolting against their oppressor landlords. So their landlords are oppressors because they have more money, and they're, yeah, oppressors because they charge rent. Well, guess what? Like, and they're saying, hey, the government's saying, hey, like, you can't evict people. You can't do that. That's unfair. Well, it's the California government's fault for closing down all their businesses and forcing people out of work. It's all their fault anyways. So so this is kind of cool. The Republicans are trying to put forward a bill calling for the audit of the CDC. The CDC is just garbage. You can't trust anything they say. They keep flip-flopping on everything. They keep just like the WHO, they say one thing and then 6 months later say another thing. So and they're just a part of the party, guys. They're a part of this whole thing. So Minnesotans take legal action over critical race theory. Okay. Well, critical race theory again is not just a neutral theory about telling the truth. It's seeing everything through that lens of oppressed and oppressors, but through the lens of racial oppressed and oppressors. So that's Marxist. So this is all emerging from this Marxist mentality, this mentality that people need to be controlled. They're not going to revolt on their own. They need to be taught they need to be conditioned by the media. They need to be conditioned by the party in power and one another. So once you're conditioned enough, it's your job now to go and start conditioning other people and start teaching them through various ways and means. And so wherever you see this kind of Marxism happen in history, you see following it really dark stuff, really actual oppression. So people who are Marxists don't all, like I said in other videos, people who are Marxists don't always know they're Marxists. But a lot of them are seeing the world through this lens of like various power structures being corrupt, that all these hierarchies need to be flattened down and everything needs to come back down to base level. Well, guess what? You're never going to get that. You're never going to get that where everybody is at the same level. Everybody's, everybody is equal in value, but you're never going to have everybody having the exact same amount of money, everybody having the exact same amount of power. There's always been power hierarchies since the dawn of civilization. It's just a human thing. Like people are either like living in poverty or living in riches or somewhere in between, right? And so like I said, this is not happening by accident. These theories are meant to divide us in a lot of various ways, and to see the world as an oppressive place, and to show anybody, and to say like, hey, anybody who is different than you is actually an oppressor. So they do it along the lines of, like we've talked about, race, gender, sexual preference, sexual orientation, um, economic status, uh, like environmental mindedness. So like, if you disagree at all with the eco-critical framework, even though I am a very environmental person, I care about the how much water I use. I care about how much energy I use. I try not to waste a bunch of gas. Um, like, but if you disagree with some of the policies that they and some of the philosophies that they want to put out there, you are somebody who wants to destroy the planet. And so, and I, like I said in my environmentalist video, which I would recommend watching that if you really want to get insight on like the way as that Christians should, because I was in this movement, I was in the eco-critical movement, and so I feel like I can recognize some of the dangers that emerge from that movement. But basically, the height of their intellectual crusade for, I guess you could call it environmental justice, is that humanity must die, or at least a large part of humanity must die in order for the world to survive. And we see that coming through the Planet Earth series. We see the Planet Earth series say, oh, 100 years ago there was this many people, and now there's this many people, and therefore the world is dying, therefore measures need to be taken, therefore top-down control, therefore eugenics. Like, there's no other way to really like control a population other than, and this is what leading experts have talked about, reproductive health, controlling reproductive health. And what do we think of when we hear that as Christians? We think of abortion and birth control. Abortion and birth control. Those were both movements that stemmed out of the eugenic movement, right? So finding the solution in eugenics is a big red flag. So of course, be a steward of the land, be environmentally minded, be all those things, believe that everybody should be treated equal, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their gender, and believe those things, but recognize that those very real cries in our hearts for justice are being manipulated by a system of philosophy that doesn't actually care about those things. It actually just wants to deliver us over to our destruction, to have societies start warring with each other, start turning against each other, and start tearing each other's throats out, because we believe it's the right thing to do, because we're seeing things as oppressors. And so people nowadays don't see Marxism as a real threat. People nowadays do see Christians as a real threat, which is interesting, because if you look at the leader of Christianity, who is Jesus, he was a man who was God in the flesh, who came into the world, who laid down his life for the sins of humanity, who rose from the grave on the third day, is reigning right now in heaven forevermore, and will return to judge the world. Whereas on the other hand, you have a bum, Karl Marx. You have a bum who couldn't do anything on his own, who hated his parents, who hated God, who worshipped the devil, who couldn't provide for his children, who lived off of an allowance, who couldn't take a bath, and whose philosophy led to the hundreds of millions of deaths. So let's see, let's weigh those two ideas, those two leaders against each other, and see which one we really think is actually looking out for the best interests. Because what does the Bible teach us about our enemies? Does it teach us that we should go and deliver our enemies over to the party in power? No, it says we pray for our enemies. If our enemy strikes us, we turn the other cheek so that they can strike us again. If our enemy curses us, we bless them. That's what Christianity teaches. What does Marxism teach? Fear your enemy. Hurt your enemy. Gain power over your enemy. Crush them under your feet. And that's what you saw in the dekulakization. So now we have people that are being taught these things without knowing that they're being taught these things, because these things pervade the media. And that is why 100% of the people on my poll yesterday said they don't trust the media because it's operating under this system of creating enemies. So anyways, I just want to do something fun. I have no idea what I'm going to find here, so bear with me. I just want to look at, go on to YouTube here, and we're not going to watch any videos on YouTube, but I'm going to look at CNN and see what their headlines are, because I just told you some stuff that's actually happening. So let's just pull this up. Okay, so here's some headlines from CNN. Mind-boggling data about the unvaccinated and COVID-19. So again, they're pushing this like vaccination on everybody. They want everybody to get vaccinated whether they want to or not. It should be up to you whether you get vaccinated or not, by the way. So they're trying to demonize everybody who's unvaccinated. MyPillow CEO decided to pull his ads. Why MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell decided to pull his ads from Fox News. So, I mean, they're demonizing him because he's a Republican and he believed that the election was stolen. And he offered $5 million to anybody who could debunk the case made for the election fraud, which there was plenty of evidence showing how much fraud was going on in this election. But you're not allowed to say that or you're censored, right? So yeah, that's something that we need to be thinking about, is like, there's a good case for like substantial election fraud, and that almost enough to show that Donald Trump did win the election, but it was stolen from him. And that's the thing, is people on the left will decry you, they will make fun of you, they will call you a conspiracy theorist if you say anything about that. But they do believe that Donald Trump lost the 2016 election based on no evidence. There's no evidence. They tried to find evidence throughout the whole 4-year term of Donald Trump. They couldn't find any evidence. Meanwhile, there is like mountains of evidence, and still evidence. There's counties that are trying to cover this up. That are trying not. They're not allowing audits to come in, election audits. So they're hiding something, but you're not allowed to talk about it, or you're a conspiracy theorist, or you're labeled as a misinformation super spreader, etc. So, anyways, that's one of their headlines. Mike Lindell is an evil right-wing extremist Republican who needs to be silenced. All right. Well, that wasn't what but it's basically, that's the subtext of all of these headlines. So the next one is lawmaker shot at Jonestown, compared Trump to cult leader Jim Jones. So there you go. Trump is like, usually I'm surprised like more of these aren't about Trump, because he's usually like the only thing that they think is going on in the world in the left. They're like, Donald Trump is the most dangerous thing in the world. Meanwhile, remember all those other headlines I was talking about, and that was just today. Like there was more happening yesterday and the day before. Sorry, something just popped up on my phone, and there's more of that happening before, and it's every day. You know, there's an onslaught of new crazy headlines that it's like they'll scare you. So if you're watching CNN, if you're watching New York Times, if you're watching MSNBC, and you're kind of like wondering why aren't they talking about anything else? You're not crazy. There's other stuff going on. Start looking for some alternative information. Scientists confused as COVID-19 cases in the UK mysteriously plunge. So that's the thing. CNN really doesn't like it when there's good news about COVID. They can't handle it. Like, okay, in the UK, cases are now dropping. So it shows that they were rising and then they plateaued and then now they're dropping. And CNN doesn't like that. So they're like, scientists are wondering why all of a sudden there's good news about COVID. Anyways, ex-Fox reporter reveals why Tucker Carlson is lying about vaccines. So Tucker Carlson's the enemy. People who watch his show are the enemy. He's a right-wing white supremacist, etc. So those are things that are being taught. So it's all conditioning people to think of anybody who is a Republican or a conservative, to think of them as the most real threat to humanity right now. They're the oppressors. We're the good people. We're the virtuous who are fighting against this invisible oppressor. Why the unvaccinated live in an alternate universe. So people who, if you are skeptical about the vaccines, you are actually not even, you are an insane person. You are going insane because you're questioning whether this, remember what I said about the vaccine, guys. I got it. I probably wouldn't have got it if I wasn't trying to protect my mom. But I don't know. But yeah, they're forcing the vaccines. They're forcing this stuff. So why the unvaccinated live in an alternative universe. See why the CPAC attendees told Donnie O'Sullivan about Trump. So CPAC, Republican conservative conference or something, right? I don't really know that much about it, but that's the danger. The CPAC people who are going and meeting and talking about, loving America and wanting this Marxist garbage to stop, not trusting the media, all that stuff. Nurse reveals how she pranks COVID deniers who call her a crisis actor. So yeah, COVID deniers. And what they want to do with that title, COVID deniers, is if you, obviously I believe COVID is a real thing. I'm not against the vaccine, but I am against this forced thought and putting people into a universal mentality, this bovine herd mentality about COVID-19, and that anybody who deviates from your opinion just in the slightest is a COVID-19 heretic that needs to be exiled from the nation, right? So so basically, if you disagree with that the vaccines need to be forced on people, you're a COVID denier. So it's just like what they're doing with if you question the Biden administration, you're an evil right-wing white supremacist, conspiracy theorist, QAnon, crazy person who needs to be wrapped up in a straitjacket and put into a padded cell, etc. Right? So you can see where this stuff is headed. Marco Rubio, hating on Marco Rubio because he's a Republican. So all this stuff, and I'm not saying the right doesn't criticize the left in there, but they're talking about all of these things. All of these are evil right wingers, and so that's showing how it's trying to force thought onto people. It's trying to control our thoughts. It's trying to condition people to hate Republicans and Christians too, because the New York Times. I'm gonna do one more with the New York Times. We'll see if they even let me look at their headlines here. Excuse me. I gotta do my daily belch in my video, so. Okay, I'm looking for New York Times headlines. Okay, so this is, alright, New York Times headlines are Day of Rage, How Trump Supporters Took the U.S. Capitol, Visual Investigation. Okay, so they're still worried about the Capitol. They're going to use that until the day we die as reasons why they should demonize us, as reasons why anybody who disagrees with them is essentially on equal status as people who stormed into the Capitol and sat into Nancy Pelosi's chair. So if you disagree with the party in power, you stormed the Capitol by ideological proxy because you are a crazy right-wing extremist, right? That's weird. All right. Oh, that's why I'm not on the New York. Anyways, I'm not going to worry about the New York Times, but I do want to point out a couple things about the New York Times is that they are also conditioning people in that type of way. They have op-eds almost every day about, either the GOP or Christians being super evil, right? They had one after George Floyd died that I read that was especially disturbing. It was an op-ed talking about Christians being responsible for all of the world's racism, all of the world's evil, and so, which is essentially like her article. If the word Christian was replaced by progressive, it would have been more accurate. So that again, it's conditioning people. And when I posted that article about how I was alarmed by rhetoric like that, I was decried, I was slandered, I was made fun of. I had people call me and say, "Hey, you know, you shouldn't criticize the New York Times. The New York Times is just trying to report the news." And I'm like, "No, they're not. They really hate me. They hate my religion. They want to see Christianity marginalized. They want to see Christians segregated." There was actually a New Yorker magazine article that talked about segregating Christians, putting them into isolated communities, and showing that we had lost the culture war, which may well be true. Hey, whatever, but you know, I'm gonna keep fighting that culture war, and I'm gonna keep standing up for the faith. I don't care. I'm not gonna hide in my closet. Like I know Jesus said, we should pray in our closets. We should not make a big show of it in front of everybody and show how righteous we are. But that he didn't say we should just lock ourselves in our homes and never walk out into the world. And so, yeah, so these things are major issues. And then if we consider as Christians, if we consider the abortion industry, that every day over 1,000 children probably, like I don't know exactly how much. Yeah, I think it is over 1,000 children every day are being dismembered, being having their skulls crushed, they're being charred, they're being evacuated, they're being vacuumed out of the womb every single day, all across our country in every state, and euthanized. All of these things are happening every day. We should recognize that that is a sign that we are the right ones, and the people who are agreeing with that are the ones that are believing in something that is actually crazy. It goes against not only Christianity, but basic human decency to do things like that. It's a wicked act. It's infanticide, and that's what our opposition disagrees with. So if you're really thinking like, hey, I'm crazy because I believe this stuff, just remember infanticide. No, you're not crazy. But that's the thing, like, even people who agree with infanticide, who agree with the abortion industry, who support the abortion industry, who love Planned Parenthood, when I see them, I don't say they love Planned Parenthood because they're wicked people. They are evil. They are crazy. They are left-wing extremists. I don't jump to those conclusions, which they do jump to. Lots of people on the left do jump to those conclusions with me when I criticize the party in power. When people criticize Donald Trump, I don't jump to conclusions about their sanity or lack thereof, right? And so there's a difference in this. It's not the pot calling the kettle black, because I love my friends and family on the left, and I don't consider them crazy because they disagree with me. I don't consider them evil because they disagree with me. So that's a different thing, right? But they're watching, every day they're watching CNN, or every day they're listening to NPR, and they're hearing GOP, evil, GOP, evil, Christians, evil, colonialists, segregationists. They're the ones who were the racists, when really most of us know the history, but who are watching this, at least I hope so, but they do try to hide this history about the Progressive Party in America. They were the ones, not Christians, who owned slaves. They were the ones who signed into law the segregation. They were the ones who signed under Andrew Jackson's party, who founded the Democratic Party. He owned slaves, and he signed the Indian Removal Act, and he was opposed by Christians who thought that it was a wicked, evil act, and if they voted for it, they would be brought to judgment for those things with God. And so I feel as though if I support Planned Parenthood, if I support Marxism, if I just hide in my hole and am quiet about this stuff, I would rather be slandered by people outside and inside the church, and basically before my own master I stand or fall. God is the one who will bring me into judgment for what I've done. And hey, if I'm doing this all wrong, that's great. He deserves to judge me. And so I'm not going to be quiet about this stuff because it's important and we need to know it in the church. So anyways, and then I want to just like kind of tie up all of this stuff that I'm talking about with a point of commonality with everybody on the left, because basically when I become a Christian, I was still on the left, and I was a Christian for like I've only been a Christian for about 5 years now, and before that, before last year I was on the left. So 4 years as a Christian on the left. I did never, like, as soon as I became a Christian, I disagreed with abortion, right? But for the most part on the other issues, I was still left leaning, right? So like I said, I had been going to school and learning Marxism, and I had never learned about the dangers of Marxism. And I thought communism like was bad, but I didn't really know that it was directly attributable to Marxism. I thought that it was just a corrupted version of Marxism, but really like it's what Marxism has led to every time it's implemented. So I didn't really recognize the dangers of the philosophies that I was learning. And that is literally everybody who is indoctrinated with Marxism. If they knew how evil it was, they wouldn't be following it, right? So that's the point of commonality, is like recognizing, hey, like not everybody, it takes a little while to catch on that this ideology, which is like, there's really not that much substance to it. There's not that much truth in it. And I gotta tell you, like, if you believe it and you're struggling to like agree with me that Marxism is a real threat, just like try investigating it, try rejecting it, and just like it's so much more, like, you will face slander and ridicule when you reject it, but it's so much more liberating to get rid of that oppressed oppressor mentality, and that you're always fighting the oppressor. Well, there are actual oppressors right now, and they're the people in the government that are trying to silence our freedom of speech. Those are the only people that are oppressing us right now. It's not your next door neighbor who voted for Donald Trump last election. It's the people who are actually actively trying to silence freedom of speech, to force a new set of lockdowns on us, to force us into our homes, and to force us to cover up the bottom half of our face, make our face illegal for the world. These are the oppressors right now, guys. And Marxism is an oppressive philosophy. So that's the only philosophy that's oppressive. Christianity is meant to free people, to set people free from themselves. Free. Jesus said, I came not to be served, but to be the servant of many, and to lay down my life for the sins of humanity. That's what he did. He did not come to enslave us, to put us all under his rule. He died for us. He shed his blood for us. Marx came to enslave us. Marx came because he wanted to be a god. He wanted to be worshipped among men, and he is. Today, people worship his philosophy, sometimes without even knowing it. And people will think you're crazy if you say that Marxism is a present threat, communism is a present threat to our humanity. People will criticize you for that that assumption. But the other thing I wanted to say is that, just a reminder, like, if you're like, wait, why though? Why should I not support the Democratic Party? Because the Democratic Party is not Marxist. Well, I've explained this in other videos, but yeah, it is Marxist. It is, it's operating under the influence of all these different theories that emerged from Marxism. And Marxist economic theory is a main driver of the Democratic Party today. Even though Joe Biden ran as a moderate candidate, the people who are really pulling the strings, the people who are really behind him, they're all on the more radical Marxist ideal platform. And even Joe Biden is kind of, he's like Herod, you know, he's a reed blown by the wind. He'll just kind of go wherever people push him. They just set him in front of a camera and they say this, that'll keep the people, that'll keep the people subdued for now. The guy can't handle any questions that he's asked. He's just a terrible president, and he's under the influence of this Marxist power. And so we have to remember, all the Democratic Party is operating on the engine of different Marxist theories. It's using these Marxist theories that a lot of them, they know people are really caring about. People care about issues of race. People care about issues of the environment. People care about issues of gender and sexual orientation. And so they know that, and they recognize that they can use those things as a platform for their power. They can use those things in order to gain an almost universal and unilateral support system. They don't actually care about the environment. They don't actually care about race. Joe Biden actually said, if you don't vote for me, you aren't black. So if you were a black person who voted for Donald Trump, in effect what Joe Biden said you're only voting for Donald Trump because you are incapable of thinking for yourself. You have to have the Democratic Party think for you and make your decisions for you. You have to put your trust in the Democratic Party. So they are racist, right? So they don't care about restoring race relations, and they certainly don't care about gay rights or anything like that. They're just using those things because they know it's what people believe, and they know that's the vessel for their power. And then underneath Marxism, we have to remember that those things in themselves, there's truth in all of those issues. But the Marxist lens for looking at them as everything as oppressed and oppressor, as everything as dividing people against each other, that was formed from a demonic philosophy, which has its underlying root in the very principles that were the fuel for Genesis 3 coming from the serpent. So as Christians, if we're like, hey, well, I support critical race theory because I think it's fighting racism. Well, you got to remember, critical race theory, just like all these other theories I'm talking about, is rooted in the Marxist economic philosophy, the Marxist way of seeing the world, which is oppressed oppressor. Again, and we have to remember who Marx was. He worshipped the devil, right? We have to remember that he was talking about it in his poetry. He was talking about how he worshipped the devil, how he wanted to be as God, walking among men. So he was living under the influence of I believe, spiritual forces that he didn't fully understand, but were using him as a vessel. Anyways, so basically rebellion, you are being lied to, you are being oppressed, you can be better, you can be higher, you can be as God, you can be in the place of that oppressor. And we know that the highest target for Marx was religion. It was the Christian church. It was the divine family. And so in order to undermine the divine family, he had to undermine the nuclear family. He had to undermine the basic tenets of humanity, things like private property that are just common to man. He had to get rid of all these things in order to destroy humanity. I'm not saying Marx wanted to destroy humanity, but these ideas were they permeated his philosophy. And now you have people who, like people I know and love, believe that private property is a myth, that there is no such thing as ownership. And I've said it before, but like, does that mean that, hey, tonight can I just come sleep in your bed next to you? And you'd be like, no way, man, that's crazy, that's my bed. Well, no, it's technically my bed too. I have just as much right to it because private property is a myth, remember? If you're standing there texting on your phone, I just take your phone and put it in my pocket. Yeah, well, I have just as much a right to it as you do, sorry. No, ownership is not something that was invented by the Western colonialist Christian patriarchy. It was something that was around since the Sumerian civilization, the very first civilization. It's not a westernized invention. So these are all myth. Like the Marxist philosophy is a myth, but it says that everything that is actually real is the myth that needs to be undermined. So this is the way we start have to seeing things, especially as Christians, but people on the outside too, worrying about this Marxism and that it is permeating things and it is making its way into the church. And we have to reject it, regardless of whether or not it hurts us. We can't go along with it. And so that's important. And I just wanted to remind people that it took me a long time to understand those things. And I'm blessed and fortunate to have a background in Marxism, so that I not to say I was an expert on all things Marx, but that I do know at least I have a foundation of where I can expose these ideas. But we got to remember all the principles, the rebellion, the you have been lied to, deconstruct God's definition, you can be as God, transgress God's law. Those things are all alive in Marxism. God is the oppressor. Those things are all alive in Marxism, and they're all fueling this system. So, and then therefore they are fueling the various theories that emerge from Marxism. They're fueling all those other theories that I'm talking about. And the party in power is using those theories as their platform. The party in power is using those theories to divide people to their own benefit, for their own power. So these aren't just baseless conspiracy theories. These things are integral. These powers and principalities that are moving as the force behind these things, because it's kind of like, you got to admit, it's kind of like organized chaos, isn't it? Like, if you say that there's any sort of organization behind the chaos, then you're labeled as a conspiracy theorist and a QAnon, even if you don't know what QAnon actually is, like me. If you say that there's anything more behind the scenes going on, you're labeled that. But as a Christian, it makes sense. As a Christian, it makes sense that, hey, there is something more spiritual at work. And I'll tell you what, the most educated critics of Marxism and communism, seeing how widespread it had become throughout the entire world and how it led to the destruction of almost every society that it was implemented in, they recognized that there was something unseen going on behind it, something demonic, something evil, that it was the devil's agenda to kill, steal, and destroy. So there's a good series, I think it's on YouTube unless they've taken it down, which I wouldn't be surprised, called How the Specter of Communism is Ruling This World. It's like a 10-part series. It's very illuminating on what communism is, but it's basically showing how the devil is using it as a tool to control people, to control the minds of people, specifically unbelievers, but also believers who are dulled in their senses, believers who are numb to the world. It can use people and manipulate people and control them. So anyways, excuse me, I'm almost at an hour now, but I just hope that you will consider these things and just remember that if you're suspicious, if you have a question mark, if you have light bulbs going off, that's not because you're a conspiracy theorist. It's because you recognize that there is a pattern. If you're an unbeliever and you recognize that there is truth in this pattern, I just pray that you would turn to Christ, put your trust in Him, and recognize, like, hey, it's not just the Marxists that are in trouble. Christ said all must repent or perish. All must put their faith in Him, or they're not covered by Jesus. When they die, they're going to come up before the judge. They're going to be judged by Him. So anyways, thank you all, and God bless you. Please consider these things and take them seriously, and recognize that Marxism is the biggest threat that the church is facing right now and the world is facing right now. This move for power, political power by any means necessary. God bless you all, and take care.